Morning, it's November 5th. This is To My Liberal Friends. Well, today is election day, and all the eyes are focused on the race between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris. I don't want to minimize the importance of the race for the White House, but in reality, control of the U.S. Senate is the most important races out there today. And I make this comment because the Senate is where all nominations have to go. The Senate controls who can be confirmed for the federal court systems. It's where cabinet nominees have to be confirmed. And under the current rules of the Senate is where legislation has to be negotiated, and in the end, compromises have to be struck. For the past 2 years, the Democrats have had a slim majority of 51 to 49 in the upper chamber. That's allowed Chuck Schumer, the Democrat from New York, who's a Democratic majority leader, to control the agenda and decide what bills will be brought up for debate. It's the reason he never took up the House immigration bill. It's also allowed the Democrats to abuse the reconciliation process to pass wide-ranging spending programs. If Harris were to win today and Democrats retain control of the Senate, they have every intention of changing Rule 22 in the Senate. This is the Filibuster Rule, and liberals have been engaged for the past 2 years because they've been unable to pass everything they wanted on a progressive agenda. The only thing that stopped them was the refusal of 2 Democrats, Joe Manchin from West Virginia and Kyrsten Sinema from Arizona, who wisely saw the folly of changing that rule. And I've said in the past that under our founding fathers, the Senate was designed to represent states. Senators were appointed by state legislatures until 1913, and metaphorically speaking, it was to be the cooling saucer to a hot cup of coffee. And Harris has said she would support changing the rule. Democrats can only see one day ahead of them and fail to understand the long-term damage they can do to the country if that rule were abolished. One major thing Democrats would try to do is make Puerto Rico and District of Columbia states, and a move to gain 4 more Democratic senators, a pure power grab. Well, looking at the Senate races out there this year, the Democrats have been on the defensive. They're defending more seats than Republicans, and many of them in red states and swing states. 1/3 of the Senate is up for every election in 2 years. It just happened to be the time Republicans to go on the offensive. Presidential election years always bring a larger voter turnout, and that can benefit or hurt each party, depending on the mood of the country and the states that have Senate seats in play. West Virginia, with the retirement of Joe Manchin, is widely expected to elect Governor Jim Justice, which will give the Republicans a pickup. That alone will bring the Senate to a tie at 50-50. Well, looking at other key races, we have to run to Montana first. For years, Jon Tester has survived in a decidedly red state by telling voters that he's one of them, a farmer, then returning to Washington and voting with the Democratic majority. Tester voted with Biden 91% of the time. He's been fortunate to have weak candidates in each of his races due to infighting among Republicans in the state. This year, the Republicans cleared the path for Tom Sheehy, a businessman and retired Navy SEAL, and he's currently leading Tester in the polls. Trump will win Montana decisively, and Tester will need Trump voters to split their ticket to survive. Let's hope he doesn't. Tester has played the political game, refusing to endorse Harris and suddenly getting religion on the southern border. I do believe Sheehy will win, and that would be a second pickup for Republicans, enough to retake the majority, assuming all Republicans win. Back in Ohio, 3-term Democratic Senator Sherrod Brown is in the fight of his political life because of the strength and support of Trump in the state. He's been a long-time trade skeptic, but he's built a personal brand that supersedes shifts in the political tides. Brown is the only Democrat left standing in statewide office in Ohio. And Brown has faced a barrage of negative advertising from Republicans portraying him as a liberal, particularly on immigration and on transgender issues. Democrats have tried to tarnish Republican Bernie Moreno as a car salesman by pointing to his history as a wealthy owner of a chain of car dealerships. I didn't know being an entrepreneur was a bad thing. They're currently tied in the polls, and this one could go either way. A win for Moreno would be a huge pickup for Republicans. Pennsylvania is a key state in the presidential race, but also has a huge Senate race. Senator Bob Casey is trying to survive a huge challenge from Republican David McCormick. If Trump had stayed out of the race in 2022, I believe McCormick would have defeated John Fetterman. But Trump backed Mehmet Oz, and Oz won a close primary and then lost a close general election to Fetterman. Casey's been in a tough position as the only Democrat on the key issue, abortion, because he's a pro-lifer. This one could be decided by the same way the state goes in the presidential race. Let's look up in Wisconsin. Republican Arab Havdi, a wealthy banker, is trying to unseat Senator Tammy Baldwin in Wisconsin, one of 3 states that formed the Democrats' blue wall in both presidential and Senate contests. Baldwin is seen as the most vulnerable of the Democrats in those states, which also includes Michigan and Pennsylvania. has worked to run up her margin traditionally in red rural areas, making herself an expert on dairy and other agriculture products, but has been hit by Republican advertisements. The most stinging is the one that says Baldwin spends more time in New York City with her partner, where her partner lives, than in Wisconsin. In Michigan, Republicans have swooped in to support candidate Mike Rogers, the former House lawmaker who is competing against Democrat Representative Alyssa Slotkin to fill an open seat. Rogers, who unlike Hovde and McCormick, isn't wealthy enough to help finance his own campaign, so he's gotten a big assist from the Senate Republicans' campaign arm and from the Senate leadership PAC. Republicans have a long shot chance at winning in Nevada, but that would be a shocker. Republicans have to fend off a strong challenge at Ted Cruz in Texas, where he's being challenged by Congressman Colin Allred. But Cruz has been in tough races before, and according to the polls, has a 4-point lead. I think Cruz will eke out a victory and return to the Senate. Democrats have been promising to turn Texas blue for years, but they've not elected a Democrat statewide in elections since 1994. As I said, the Senate is the firewall against a radical progressive agenda. It's the stopgap against efforts to pack the Supreme Court, the defense against such thing as taxing unrealized gains, the place to prevent the bureaucratic mandates of a federal government out of control. That's why it's critical the Republicans regain the majority. And that's why I believe the Senate races are every bit as important as those for the White House, and in some ways they're more important. This has been To My Liberal Friends. Thanks for listening. On YouTube, hit the subscribe button.